Hi, and welcome to this week's Tech Takeaway with me, Wayne Miller, and my dynamic co-host, Kealan.
Very nice to meet you once again.
And Paul Stringfellow. Hi, Paul.
Hi.
Excellent.
I was more high-pitched than I realised when that came out. I don't know what was going on there. Must be these trousers.
This week, we wanted to get a little bit more information from you about your travels this week.
Yes.
So, if anyone followed Paul on LinkedIn, we would have seen he was down at Cloud Expo.
Cloud Expo, yeah.
Just, what did you learn at Cloud Expo, Paul?
Yes, I thought with travel, you wanted to ask about my holidays, but let's talk about expos. It's funny, actually, me and Kealan were talking about this before we recorded today. I take these things for granted a little bit, that I go to these kind of things on a regular basis. It's part of my role. Part of my role is to understand what's going on in space. So, what are not going on in space. That's the people smarter than me do space. But what's going on in kind of the IT space. So what are the vendors talking about? What are the customer challenges they're telling us they're looking to solve? And myself and Kealan were talking about actually how Kealan's never done one. So hasn't been to one. So I'm going to take him next time. It's like a big treat. But for this show, it's quite a big show. I was down in the XL Arena in London, and it's kind of built up of 5 different shows that amalgamate into kind of one big thing. So while my initial focus was Cloud Expo, it's actually called the Tech Show London, and you've got at one end of the hall, you've kind of got the data center show. So this is people physically building data centers. The people are still doing that. And actually, I think what you're finding is more and more companies are building. There's an ever increasing amount of data center space, because actually people are, this conversation of often I want to move to the cloud. What it often means is I just don't want to have IT stuff in my offices anymore. I'd like IT stuff somewhere else, somebody else's headache. So you're seeing this kind of growth in that. So you had that. And then we had DevOps, the DevOps show, which is stuff that, that's one of my areas of IT. That's not one of my areas of IT. Maybe that's one of Kealan's better areas. He's done a bit of dev work.
I have indeed, yeah.
So he can tell us what dev and ops are at some point in the future. And then we've got the cloud show, which was kind of around cloud technologies. And then we actually had a kind of a subversion of that, the cloud cybersecurity show. And then at the end, and perhaps the busiest part of it, to nobody's surprise, was the data analytics and AI section of the show. You kind of had these 5 things, and it was really interesting. 2 things really struck me about it. One was that how busy it was. It feels like people haven't been to an expo for 4 years and thought, let's all go to this one, which is great for the people running the show. Absolute nightmare for getting on stands, talking to people, going into some of the things that were going on. And while there was a section dedicated to AI, and I suppose is no surprise to anyone, is that permeated through all of the other bits of the show as well. There's lots and lots of conversation around what AI is for, how you get the best from AI, how people are using it in terms of their cybersecurity tools, for example, how people are using it to optimize their use of cloud. So there was this kind of whole thing of AI starting at one end, tripping it and dripping its way along almost like you could see the AI flood coming from one end of the room, like a tsunami going along everywhere else.
So, a huge amount of vendors there. Who did you kind of make a beeline to, and what kind of conversations did you have?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So when I go to shows like this, and myself and Kealan I keep saying me and Kealan were talking about. I really should probably let Kealan talk. But one of the things we were talking about was kind of how I tend to use these shows. And this is just my personal view of them. So there's kind of 2 things I try and do when I go to one of these shows. So one of them is not just to spend all my time walking around the booths trying to see if any vendors have
all the freebies. You come back with a.
Do you know what the problem is? You've got to try and find a vendor who's thought of something original, and on the whole, they haven't. So I very rarely come back with stuff in my bag, because it's just more rubbish that goes in the office. So rather than trying to do just that, I like to try and take in some of the kind of the presentations they're doing. So most of these things will have a number of theatres. This place did, some big keynote theatres, and then it had a bunch of kind of sub theatres you could go off on. And that's always quite a useful way just to understand strategically and maybe a little bit of an ahead of time. What is it that people are thinking of? Where's the focus? What is it that people are looking to do? And we can talk about some of those bits. But in terms of the vendors, what I try and avoid on the whole is actually the big vendors in the middle. So whenever you go to one of these shows, you've got the vendors who've spent an absolute fortune on building out their massive stand, and they've no doubt spent lots of money doing it. But we tend to know them already. We've spoken to them in the past, or we're speaking to them day to day, or I've spoken to them. So I always find it quite interesting the vendors I know nothing about. So there's a couple of vendors in the security space who were doing quite interesting things. Talked to some vendors around kind of their approach to dealing with the identity threat problem, which is a big challenge that I'm seeing increasingly organizations are struggling to get to cope with. And then, of course, there was just the endless amount of AI vendors who were all doing, and it was really interesting. There was lots of vendors who were adding things to GPT. So they were taking that kind of, pre-trained model and saying,
putting the data in.
Not so much that, but almost. So one of the presentations I went to, which I found really interesting, was, and I'm really sorry to the guy who did the presentation, whose name I've forgotten, but I couldn't get in the room. I was standing outside. That's my excuse. But he was talking about how, and the title of his presentation was, why is it that 85% of companies, it was a long presentation title, 85% of companies who invest in AI get no value from it. And it was a great title because it made lots of people want to go and stand and listen. And some of the things he talked about was that actually part of the challenge is that you don't really know why you're using AI in the first place. So, people will come along and say, let's turn AI on. We're having a lot of conversation about Microsoft Copilot, aren't we? Let's turn Copilot on, see what Copilot does. And he said the risk with that is that one of two things will happen. One is that you'll get absolutely no value out of your investment. So let's say you're going to use Copilot. You'll turn Copilot on. You'll spend $30 per head on your Copilot licenses for however many users you're doing it for, and you've got no idea why. And then people have a play with Copilot, and then people will go, great, that was fun. Anyway, now I'm just going to go and do something else. And whatever money you've spent returns absolutely nothing. But what was interesting was without it, that he said was almost you also can have the polar opposite of that, in that you get too much value. So what you end up with is you get too much information and you don't really know what to do with it. And so you end up with this kind of this flood. We talk about this in security a lot, this idea of this kind of
too much value.
It's returning too many results, too many potential. You just end up getting swamped with stuff, and actually you don't really know where.
Too much noise.
Actually, noise was the phrase that he used. There's so much noise coming from it. You don't know of all the value. You don't know which value is important anymore. You're just getting stuff that potentially. And I thought it was a really, and those kind of sessions are really interesting. And I say there's lots of vendors talking about how, from an AI point of view, how their tools will help you get the best out of whatever kind of, large learning model or natural language processing model or whatever it is that you're looking to use. Almost, and you see this all the time, but almost, let us show you how to get the best of it. Put our add-on on. And, and so, some of them will, some of them won't. And lots of the stands were so busy that I didn't really get the chance to ask. But it was just interesting to see that trend of lots of companies showing you how to get the best out of AI, how you could use Copilot better. I couldn't swing a cat. Not that I was swinging cats, but couldn't swing a cat for hitting people with stands about how we'll show you how to get the best out of Copilot. But you understand why, because, it's AI. It's a big topic. Microsoft are pushing it hard. People want to talk about it. So, so that was, lots of vendors doing that kind of thing. But yeah, I just try and learn something new. The whole point of going to those events is, and I was talking to.
Well, you're empowered, aren't you, when you walk away? That's, and I haven't been to an event for a while, to be fair, but I know when I've come, you want to talk about it, hence doing this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes you do want to, you want to have a plan. So when you go to these, a bit like, if you want to get value out of AI, have a plan. Well, if you want to get value out of one of these shows, so I've done quite a lot of them. So now I've got a routine that I go, that's the thing I was talking about before. I don't want to necessarily see the big vendors.
This is our tech takeaway.
Well, I suppose it is. Yeah. I don't necessarily want to see the big vendors unless there's somebody there that I want to, at least I just want to say hello, maybe I haven't seen them for a while. And sometimes you go to these shows, you do bump into people you haven't seen for a while, which is always quite useful. I caught up with a couple of guys that we used to quite a lot work with when they were at NetApp. They're no longer at NetApp. They're currently enjoying the high life of not doing much, which is nice for them. But we had a really interesting chat about how the industry had changed in the time that, since they'd kind of taken a bit of semi-retirement, and that was nice to kind of catch up with that. But beyond that, I want to learn something new, because that's the point of, I've got better things to do with my day than £300 train trips to London for wandering around the XL. But if you go with the right idea, what I get to bring back from that is things that then we can share with our customers, on shows like this or, Chalk in general, but also things that when customers are asking what's going on in that space, we've got a little bit of an idea, a little bit of an answer for it. Have you got some questions, Kealan? Come on.
I did have one, to be fair. So obviously we talked about it before with like the research and stuff. Like you're going there with a perspective to find something new out. What did you find useful on the day when you think back to it that is still fresh in your head that you think, oh, it was actually really good? Like I'm glad I seen that or spoke to someone with that.
Yeah, I think the thing that really jumped out at me was, and I mentioned him already, but it was the presentation I saw about getting value from AI, because I think at the moment, I spoke to him a little bit afterwards, so I'd, don't tell the people who organise the show, but I sneaked my way into the press section. I did have a VIP badge, so who were they to stop me? Basically, they had sandwiches on, and I was hungry, so I thought I'll get myself in the press section. But anyway, he was there, and we had a little bit of a chat there, and that was that. It was. It's like most of these shows, it's the chats that you have that are really interesting, as opposed to necessarily what the vendors do and what the presentations are doing. So, but yeah, I think that thing about getting the best out of AI and having a plan for how you're going to use it really did stick with me. I think there was a couple of other things about, not necessarily new things, but were nice things to hear in terms of almost a little bit of validation of some of the conversations we're having. So, it was nice to hear from a couple of cybersecurity vendors talking about how they're using AI and what their plans are. And their plans aren't really necessarily yet about using AI to do security, but actually more about how you use AI to get the best out of the information that's already in there. So, this idea that you're gathering lots and lots of this information, lots of this data, but it's really hard to
being taught how to break it down and actually read it without it just being raw data at the end of it. Yeah.
And it was interesting. The one of the presentations I went to, he was talking about actually the difference between, because I find this quite an interesting concept, is that we talk about AI like it's something new, but what's the difference between all this AI stuff that we're doing and this traditional stuff that we've done? And he gave a good example, and he used the idea of solving crimes. So, so he didn't talk about AI-powered Batman or anything like that, but the idea of how do the police use this kind of thing? And he was saying, so almost the difference is that traditional IT, you would probably have a big data source, big database probably, and you would write very specific queries looking for information about the people that you had in your database. So I'm looking for people who've committed, maybe have committed this crime, can I have a list of all those people. So you go in and you would ask that query, and you would have created all of that data, all that stuff would exist in the records for those users. He said the difference with AI is what you would do is that you would give AI lots of information about that and say, go and learn about the people who have committed, because all these people have committed that crime. So rather than me tell you what I'm looking for, you go and learn about all those people. And now what I want you to do is go and tell me, almost a bit sci-fi, a bit Minority Report, but go and tell me about the other people I know who fit that same bill, who might be doing the same thing, and we've just not figured it out yet. I thought it was quite a good example of the difference between the two. That idea of learning and extrapolating more intelligence from that, and then learning what you're looking. So the IT itself learning what it's looking for and going to find more of it, as opposed to basically we've told the IT we've set all the ground rules. We've said this is all the data that you've got, and then we just get good at asking it to go away and do things. So here's some queries. Now just go and get that. And it's really good at doing that at scale. That's what IT does. And AI is also good at doing those kind of patterns. So I spoke to, I won't necessarily say who, but I spoke to somebody who's a media manager of a large sporting organisation, and he was talking about how they were using cloud-based storage. So with Wasabi, actually a company we partner with, but how they use cloud-based storage alongside all of their kind of editing and social media tools that they have to start to do things that they've just not been able to do in the past. And he showed an example of where they're able to show sporting footage, and in that footage, not only identify all the participants, all the players in any given clip, but also using it for other things like spotting where a sponsor's logo has been shown, or where a advertising board around the edge of the pitch maybe shows a certain sponsor. Being able to look at, and he shared stuff about in certain territories where they might share that information, that there's things they're not allowed to show. So what they're doing is starting to use AI to say, if you see this in this clip, you need to edit that out before we share it. And so they were still doing, so they said they would never publish anything that didn't have human oversight. So they didn't just do it and let it go. So there's always human oversight. And he said, but actually we just couldn't do that because I'd need 1,000 people to do that. And now what I'm able to do is use technology to take that information and do brand new things with it. And he talked about an idea of almost like monetizing some of that information because, you know, the organization they're part of, they're like any other part of a business. Their job is to deliver profit back into the business and deliver that profit and keep costs low, you know. And so what was really useful was some of those kind of use cases around how you use, in this case, cloud storage with some intelligence over the top, you know, and stuff like that. That kind of really stuck with me because I think those stories are really important, particularly in these kind of new areas where you're looking at AI. We're looking at, you know, how do we use cloud and AI together? Where's the value? Because it's easy for the likes of us to say, oh, you should go and buy some cloud storage because, you know, why not? That's what the cool kids are doing. But actually what you want to hear is, yeah, but if I do, what's the benefit? What do I get out of doing that? So some of that stuff's really, and that's kind of why I go down to these shows, you know. And I think if you're in a role like mine and you've got the time to do it, and sometimes I get to do that because some of the folk we work with, some of the IT decision makers, some of the CTOs we work with don't have the time.
Yeah,
but you know, part of my role is to go and do that, and then we can kind of share that information back. So yeah, I mean, I got loads of value out of it. It was a good day.
So the takeaways are: have a strategy.
Yep, definitely.
Before you go to these, carry a press pass because you get free buttons.
Yeah.
And you know, go and speak to the people who deliver the seminars.
Yep.
You know, get a bit more value that way. So, okay, well, Kealan, thank you for joining us. Paul, thank you for them insights. If you want to follow us, click on the tubes, or wherever you get podcasts. I'm sure you'll figure it out by now. If you found this one, I'm sure you can find some more of them. But yeah, thanks, Kealan. Thanks, Paul. And until next time, see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.